The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the shouting inside the operating room. It was the way Evelyn Brooks quietly took one careful step forward, looked at the patient's monitor, and realized everyone else had missed the same warning. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't panic. She simply said, "Doctor, I think we should stop for a second." No one expected those few calm words to change everything. City Memorial Hospital never really noticed Evelyn Brooks. She arrived before sunrise, stayed long after her shift ended, and somehow managed to remember every patient's name. Families often looked for her before asking anyone else for help. She never rushed conversations. She never ignored frightened people sitting alone in waiting rooms. Most of the nurses admired her. Many of the younger doctors quietly asked for her advice. But Evelyn never looked for attention. She believed that if a patient walked out healthier than when they came in, that was enough. The hospital had recently hired a new chief surgeon, Dr. Nolan Mercer. His reputation was impressive. He had published research, spoken at medical conferences, and expected perfection from everyone around him. He also believed confidence was the same thing as competence. Dr. Mercer spoke loudly. He moved quickly. He expected immediate obedience. During staff meetings, he rarely looked at nurses when discussing treatment plans. "They're here to support surgery," he once said. "The decisions belong to physicians." The room had gone quiet. Evelyn never argued. She simply returned to work. One evening, an ambulance rushed through the emergency entrance carrying a middle-aged construction worker who had suffered severe injuries after a workplace accident. Within minutes, the trauma team surrounded the patient. Doctors called out instructions. Machines beeped steadily. The operating room filled with focused movement. Evelyn prepared instruments while watching every monitor with practiced attention. She noticed tiny changes that most people ignored. The patient's blood pressure dipped. His breathing pattern shifted. One number on the monitor changed only slightly. To many people, it looked unimportant. To Evelyn, it didn't. She looked toward Dr. Mercer. "Doctor," she said calmly, "I think something's changing." Without turning around, he answered, "Everything is under control." She glanced back at the monitor. Another reading changed. A little faster this time. She stepped closer. "I believe we should check for internal bleeding before we continue." Several nurses exchanged nervous looks. One resident quietly studied the monitor. Dr. Mercer finally looked up. His face tightened. "We're already treating the source," he replied sharply. "The numbers suggest there may be another injury," Evelyn answered carefully. For a brief moment, silence settled across the room. Everyone waited. The resident cleared his throat. "Doctor, maybe we should." Dr. Mercer cut him off. "No." He looked directly at Evelyn. "I don't need instructions during my operating room." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "I'm only trying to help the patient." I said continue. No one spoke again. The operation moved forward. A few minutes later, another monitor alarm sounded. This time it was impossible to ignore. Dr. Mercer immediately ordered additional imaging. The scan revealed exactly what Evelyn had quietly suspected. There was another serious internal injury that had not appeared obvious at first. The surgical team quickly adjusted the procedure. Nearly an hour later, the patient's condition finally stabilized. Relief spread through the room. Several nurses silently looked toward Evelyn. She simply continued cleaning instruments as though nothing unusual had happened. The resident walked beside her afterward. "You saw it before anyone else." Evelyn gave a small smile. "We all want the same outcome. You probably saved his life." She gently shook her head. "The whole team saved him." The resident wanted to say more. Instead, he watched her disappear down the hallway toward her next patient. Word about the operation spread quickly through the hospital. Some staff quietly praised Evelyn's observation. Others wondered whether Dr. Mercer would acknowledge what had happened. He didn't. Instead, he called an emergency staff meeting before the night shift ended. Doctors, nurses, technicians, everyone gathered inside the conference room. Dr. Mercer stood at the front with folded arms. "Our operating room depends on discipline," he began. No one questions leadership during critical procedures. The room became uncomfortably still. His eyes settled on Evelyn. You interrupted surgery, she answered calmly. I voiced a patient concern. You challenged my judgment. I shared what I observed. He stepped closer. The operating room cannot function if every nurse believes they're directing surgeons. Nobody moved. Several nurses stared at the floor. The resident who had witnessed everything looked ready to speak. Before he could, Dr. Mercer continued. Effective immediately, Evelyn Brooks is dismissed from City Memorial Hospital. A quiet gasp spread across the room. Someone whispered, "What?" Another nurse took one step forward. "Doctor, that's not fair. This decision is final." Evelyn remained completely still. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply nodded once. "If that's your decision," she said softly, "I hope every patient here continues receiving excellent care." She walked out before anyone could stop her. Inside the locker room, she carefully folded her uniform instead of stuffing it into her bag. She removed her hospital identification badge and looked at it for a long moment. Nearly 15 years. Thousands of patients. Countless overnight shifts. She placed the badge inside her locker. One older janitor paused outside the doorway. "I never thought I'd see this day." Evelyn smiled gently. "Things change. They're making a mistake." She zipped her bag. Maybe someday they'll see things differently. As she walked through the hospital lobby, several patients recognized her. One elderly woman reached for her hand. "Are you leaving already?" "My shift is over," Evelyn answered kindly. "Thank you for taking care of my husband. It was an honor." Outside, the evening air felt strangely quiet. She adjusted the strap on her bag and began walking toward the parking lot without looking back. High above the city, a distant sound echoed across the sky. At first, people assumed it was ordinary air traffic. Then the sound grew louder, much louder. Hospital security officers looked up. Doctors stepped outside. Patients gathered near the entrance. The thunder of massive rotor blades rolled across the hospital grounds. One helicopter appeared over the horizon. Then a second. Both were flying straight toward City Memorial. And they weren't slowing down. The helicopters did not circle the hospital or pass overhead. They descended with purpose, their powerful rotors sending dust and loose leaves across the parking lot as every eye turned toward the landing area. Doctors stepped out onto the front sidewalk. Nurses gathered near the entrance. Patients and visitors stood silently behind the glass doors, trying to understand what they were seeing. City Memorial had received military patients before, but nothing like this. These aircraft carried no hospital markings. Within seconds of landing, the side doors opened. Several uniformed personnel stepped out, followed by a tall officer in a dark flight suit. His calm expression never changed as he walked directly toward the main entrance. Hospital security met him halfway. "Sir, this is a restricted area," one guard said politely. The officer reached into his pocket and presented official identification. "We're looking for Evelyn Brooks." The guard blinked. "The nurse?" "Yes." The answer was immediate. "Where is she?" The security guard hesitated. I believe she just left." The officer's face became noticeably more serious. "How long ago?" "Maybe 5 minutes." Without saying another word, he turned toward the rest of his team. "She's on foot. Split into search groups. Stay respectful. Find her quickly." The teams moved without panic but with remarkable speed. Inside the lobby, whispers spread faster than anyone could stop them. "They're looking for Evelyn? Why would the military need her? Did something happen?" Nobody had an answer. Hospital administrators hurried downstairs after hearing reports of military aircraft outside. Among them was Chief Surgeon Dr. Nolan Mercer. He looked through the front doors with clear irritation. "What is all this?" The hospital administrator answered quietly. "They're asking for Nurse Evelyn Brooks." Dr. Mercer frowned. "She no longer works here." The flight officer walked inside before anyone could say another word. "I understand you're the chief surgeon." "I am." I'm Commander Reed Callahan. They shook hands briefly. We're here for Evelyn Brooks. Dr. Mercer folded his arms. I'm afraid you've wasted your trip. She was dismissed moments ago. For the first time since arriving, Commander Callahan paused. You fired her? Correct. On whose authority? My own. Silence filled the lobby. The commander's eyes remained steady. That decision has created a serious problem. Dr. Mercer raised an eyebrow. I'm sure you'll find another qualified nurse. Commander Callahan did not react. We're not looking for another qualified nurse. He leaned forward slightly. We're looking for Evelyn Brooks. The difference in his voice caught everyone's attention. Several nurses standing nearby exchanged uneasy looks. The commander continued. Where did she go? We don't keep track of former employees. Think carefully. I already answered. The commander took one slow breath. Doctor, this is not about employment paperwork. He looked around the crowded lobby before lowering his voice. A critically injured service member is being transported to a secure medical facility. No one spoke. He requires a specialist whose experience cannot be replaced on short notice. Dr. Mercer answered confidently. You have military surgeons. We do. You have trauma physicians. We do. You have emergency nurses. We have many. Then why come here? Commander Callahan looked directly into his eyes. Because none of them are Evelyn Brooks. The words hung in the air. Even Dr. Mercer seemed uncertain for the first time. Nearby, an older intensive care nurse quietly stepped forward. I've worked beside Evelyn for 12 years. The commander turned toward her. Perhaps you can help us. She hesitated. I don't know much about her. What do you know? The nurse smiled faintly. She never talked about herself. She looked toward the empty hallway leading to the staff lockers. But there were moments. What kind of moments? She remembered a winter evening years earlier. A patient had suddenly stopped breathing before the crash team arrived. Evelyn had taken control without raising her voice. She directed doctors twice her rank with complete confidence. Nobody questioned her. Later, when everything was over, she quietly returned to cleaning equipment as if nothing unusual had happened. There were other times, the nurse continued. She recognized injuries most of us had only read about. Another nurse joined the conversation. I once asked where she learned those techniques. What did she say? The commander asked. She smiled and said, Experience teaches faster than textbooks. Nothing else. Nothing. A respiratory therapist spoke up from the back of the crowd. I noticed scars on her arms once. The room became quiet again. They looked old. Someone else nodded. I remember that. She always covered them. Dr. Mercer interrupted. You're building stories out of ordinary observations. Commander Callahan ignored the comment. Did she ever receive visitors? The older nurse thought for a moment. Every Veterans Day. What happened? A few men came to thank her. What men? They never explained. Were they veterans? They looked like it. They always brought flowers. And they never stayed long. The commander slowly nodded. None of that surprised him. The hospital administrator stepped closer. Commander, who exactly is Evelyn Brooks? For several seconds, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, every person in the lobby listened. Some people spend their lives asking for recognition. He glanced toward the front doors. Others spend their lives avoiding it. He stopped there. Dr. Mercer looked frustrated. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. You expect us to believe a civilian nurse is somehow essential to a military operation? I expect you to understand that experience comes in many forms. The commander's radio crackled. Search Team 1. Go ahead. No visual. Search Team 2. Negative. The commander's expression tightened. Continue. He turned back toward security. Review your cameras. We can do that. Now. Within moments, security staff were replaying footage from the hospital entrance. There she was, Evelyn Brooks. walking calmly across the parking lot with a single overnight bag over her shoulder. She never looked back. The timestamp showed only minutes had passed. Commander Callahan studied the screen. Zoom in. The technician enlarged the image. Evelyn had crossed the street instead of entering the employee parking garage. She didn't drive, the technician said. No. The commander immediately understood. She took public transportation. He reached for his radio. All units update. Subject is likely traveling by bus or train. Expand the search to nearby transit stops. Teams acknowledged immediately. The helicopters remained on standby. As personnel hurried back outside, the older nurse quietly called after the commander. Will she be all right? He stopped walking. If we find her in time. He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he disappeared through the hospital doors. Across town, completely unaware of the search unfolding behind her, Evelyn sat alone near the back of a city bus. She rested her bag on her lap and stared silently out the window, believing the hardest part of her day was finally over. Then, in the distance, she noticed two helicopters changing direction. They were heading straight toward the road ahead. Evelyn Brooks watched the helicopters through the bus window without giving them much thought. Aircraft often crossed the city skyline, and after the day she had just endured, she had little energy to wonder where they were going. She rested her overnight bag against her knees and looked back out the window, trying to imagine what tomorrow might look like without the hospital that had been part of her life for nearly 15 years. The bus rolled through evening traffic. People climbed on. Others stepped off. No one recognized the quiet woman sitting near the back. An elderly passenger settled into the seat across from her and smiled. Long day. Evelyn returned the smile. They usually are. You work at the hospital? I did. The man noticed the folded uniform inside her bag. I'm sorry to hear that. She simply nodded. Sometimes life changes faster than we expect. Before the conversation could continue, the bus slowed near a downtown transit station. Traffic ahead had stopped. The driver looked through the windshield. Looks like some kind of road closure. Passengers leaned toward the windows. Several military vehicles had blocked part of the intersection. Uniformed personnel spoke calmly with local police while directing traffic around the area. The bus doors remained closed. A minute later, one of the officers stepped aboard. He removed his cap politely. Good evening. Sorry for the delay. Everyone watched quietly. We're looking for someone. His eyes moved through the passengers until they stopped on Evelyn. He walked toward her without hesitation. Ms. Evelyn Brooks? She looked up. Yes. The officer relaxed slightly. Ma'am, Commander Reed Callahan would like to speak with you. The other passengers stared in silence. Evelyn stood slowly. Is something wrong? I'm afraid I can't discuss it here. She glanced toward the driver. I don't want to inconvenience everyone. The driver smiled. I think they'll understand. Outside, Commander Callahan was already waiting. As Evelyn stepped onto the sidewalk, he greeted her with a respectful nod. Thank you for stopping. I didn't exactly have a choice. A faint smile crossed his face. No, I suppose not. She studied his expression. This isn't about my job, is it? No. Then why are you looking for me? The commander motioned toward a quieter corner away from the growing crowd. I need your help. She folded her arms. I was dismissed from my hospital less than an hour ago. I know. I'm no longer part of any medical staff. That doesn't change what you know. She remained silent. The commander continued carefully. A special operations officer was critically injured during a classified training mission earlier today. She didn't interrupt. Our medical team has stabilized him, but his condition remains extremely complex. You have excellent physicians. We do. You have experienced trauma surgeons. Yes. She looked directly at him. So why come for me? The commander took a slow breath. Because one of our senior surgeons requested you by name. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Who? I'm not authorized to tell you. She looked away for a moment. I haven't spoken to anyone from your organization in years. We know. So how would they even know where I work? They never stopped keeping emergency contact records. That answer lingered between them. The evening breeze carried the distant sound of city traffic. Finally, Evelyn spoke. I left that part of my life behind. The commander nodded. You did. I chose a civilian hospital because I wanted something normal. I understand. She looked at him carefully. Do you? He answered honestly. Probably not completely. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then he quietly said, He has a family. Evelyn looked back. A wife, he continued. 2 young daughters. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Our team believes time is becoming our biggest enemy. She closed her eyes for just a second. Not because she was thinking about military service. She was thinking about another family waiting in another hospital years ago. Another injured patient. Another impossible night. The memories returned without warning. Cold rain. Bright surgical lights. Voices calling for supplies. Young medics refusing to give up. She had promised herself those days were over. The commander seemed to recognize the hesitation on her face. I know what you're remembering. No, she answered softly. You don't. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into a small folder and removed a worn photograph. He handed it to her. It showed 6 people standing beside a medical evacuation helicopter. Most of them looked barely older than college students. Evelyn immediately recognized every face. 5 of them were smiling. One was her. She had not seen that photograph in more than a decade. You kept this? No. Then who did? The officer we're trying to save. She stared at the picture. He always carried it. Her fingers tightened around the edges. He told us, the commander said quietly, that if anything ever happened to him and there was still a chance, we should find the woman who refused to leave anyone behind. Evelyn looked down. A faint scar crossed the back of her hand. One she rarely noticed anymore. The commander spoke again. Your record remains classified. I'm aware. Most of my own team has never seen it. She handed the photograph back. I wasn't looking for recognition. I know. I was looking for peace. He nodded slowly. And for several years you found it. She looked toward the city lights. My hospital fired me today. They made a decision. They embarrassed me in front of people I've worked beside for years. I heard. They don't want me there. The commander answered gently. This isn't about the hospital. She smiled sadly. No. It's about someone who still needs a nurse. The words stayed with her. She thought about the patient lying somewhere between life and death. She thought about the family waiting for news. She thought about the promise every nurse silently makes long before wearing the uniform. Patients come first. Always. She released a slow breath. If I say yes. The commander waited. I do this for the patient. Of course. Not for medals. I understand. Not for secrets. Agreed. And not because my former employer suddenly realizes my value. A small smile appeared. They're not part of this mission. She picked up her bag. Then let's not waste any more time. Within minutes, she climbed aboard one of the waiting helicopters. As the rotors began spinning faster, Commander Callahan fastened his headset and looked toward the cockpit. Departure approved. The helicopter lifted into the evening sky. Far below, the lights of City Memorial Hospital grew smaller with every passing second. Evelyn looked out the window one last time. She had no idea that the place she had just left behind was about to learn the truth about the quiet nurse they had so easily let go. The helicopter had barely touched the ground before Evelyn was already moving toward the medical building. There was no ceremony, no introductions, and no wasted time. A military physician met her at the entrance and handed her a digital tablet containing the patient's latest reports. He lost a lot of blood before reaching us, the physician said while walking beside her. We've stabilized him twice, but every improvement fades. Evelyn scanned the information without slowing down. What treatments have already been attempted? The physician listed them one by one. She listened carefully. By the time they reached the secure operating suite, she had already formed several questions. Inside, the atmosphere felt different from any civilian hospital. Everyone spoke calmly. Every movement had a purpose. No one cared about job titles. They cared about finding answers. A senior trauma surgeon stepped forward. "I'm Colonel Adrian Holt." Evelyn nodded. "Good to see you again." The colonel smiled. "I wish it were under better circumstances." He led her toward the operating room. "The patient has survived injuries that would normally be fatal. And now, we're losing ground." She reviewed the monitor readings. Blood pressure, heart rhythm, laboratory values. Every number told part of the story. She looked at the patient for only a few seconds before turning back toward the imaging scans displayed on a nearby screen. "Show me the earlier images." A technician immediately complied. She compared them carefully. Then she looked at the newest scan. Something caught her attention. "Zoom in." The image enlarged. She remained silent. The room waited. Finally, she pointed to a small area near the edge of one image. "This wasn't here before." Colonel Holt stepped closer. "You think it's significant?" "I do." Another surgeon studied the screen. "It's subtle." "So was the first injury at City Memorial today," Evelyn replied quietly. The room became still. She continued examining every image. Then she looked toward the anesthesiologist. "Has his pressure dropped every time you reduce medication?" "Yes." "And recovered only slightly afterward?" "Exactly." She nodded. "There's another source causing instability." The colonel folded his arms. "We've searched." "I know. But we haven't searched in the right place." He looked at the scans again. "What do you recommend?" Evelyn outlined her observations calmly. No one interrupted. The surgeons asked questions. She answered each one with quiet confidence. Within minutes, the team adjusted their plan. The procedure began again. Hours seemed to disappear inside the operating room. There were no dramatic speeches. Only steady voices. "Clamp. Pressure holding. Suction. Good." Evelyn remained focused on the patient's changing condition. She noticed tiny improvements before the monitors reflected them. When another physician hesitated between two options, Colonel Holt looked toward Evelyn. "What do you think?" She answered without emotion. "The second approach reduces unnecessary risk." He nodded immediately. "Let's do that." No one questioned why the colonel trusted her judgment. It was obvious they had worked together before. As the procedure continued, the patient's condition slowly became more stable. The numbers that had worried everyone for hours finally stopped drifting in the wrong direction. The anesthesiologist smiled for the first time all evening. "Pressure is improving." Another physician looked at the monitor. "It's holding." The room seemed to breathe again. Colonel Holt quietly removed his gloves after the final stage of the procedure. "He'll need close observation, but I believe he'll recover." Several members of the team exchanged relieved smiles. One younger military doctor approached Evelyn. "I've read training material based on your field protocols." She looked surprised. "I didn't know anyone still used them. They're standard in several advanced trauma programs." She simply nodded. The compliment seemed to make her uncomfortable. Recognition had never been something she chased. Outside the operating suite, Commander Callahan was waiting. "He's stable." Colonel Holt smiled. For the first time today, the commander turned toward Evelyn. "Thank you." She shook her head. "He's not out of danger yet." "No, but now he has a chance." Before anyone could continue, another officer entered the hallway carrying a secured folder. "Colonel." He accepted it. "We received authorization." The colonel looked at Evelyn. "Only partial authorization." She understood. Some records would remain classified forever. He opened the folder anyway. Inside were several service records, old mission summaries, and commendations with large portions covered by black markings. Commander Callahan looked toward one of the younger physicians. "You've wondered why everyone knows Nurse Brooks." The physician nodded. Colonel Holt handed him one page. "Read the public section." The young doctor scanned it slowly. His eyes widened. "This says she helped develop battlefield medical procedures that are still being taught." It does. Another page described advanced trauma instruction given to military medical teams. Although many details remained hidden, one fact was clear. Evelyn had spent years training people who now served around the world. The young physician looked at her with new respect. "You never told anyone?" She smiled gently. "My patients didn't need my resume." Far across the city, City Memorial Hospital was unusually quiet. Staff members still talked about the helicopters. The rumors grew with every passing hour. One nurse approached Dr. Mercer outside his office. "Sir, what is it?" The military called again. He looked up. "What did they want?" "They asked whether we had located Evelyn before they did. And we told them no." The nurse hesitated. "They also asked for copies of her employment records." Dr. Mercer frowned. "Why?" They wouldn't explain. She left him standing alone. For the first time since becoming chief surgeon, confidence began giving way to doubt. He remembered the operation earlier that day. He remembered dismissing Evelyn's warning. He remembered firing her in front of everyone. He sat down slowly. Something no longer made sense. If military surgeons trusted her judgment, if experienced commanders crossed the city to find her, if she possessed knowledge that even specialists respected, then who had he really dismissed? Back at the military medical facility, Colonel Holt stepped into the recovery room. The patient remained unconscious but stable. Machines now produced steady, reassuring rhythms. Evelyn quietly adjusted a blanket near the bedside. She always believed healing continued long after surgery ended. Commander Callahan entered moments later with a thoughtful expression. "The patient's wife has arrived." Evelyn looked up. "Does she know?" "She knows someone she has never met refused to give up." Before Evelyn could answer, the patient's fingers moved for the first time. The monitor responded with a subtle change. Everyone in the room turned toward the bed. Then, slowly, the injured officer began to open his eyes. The room fell completely silent when the injured officer opened his eyes. Every monitor continued its steady rhythm, but no one moved. After hours of uncertainty, that small moment meant more than any celebration. Colonel Adrian Holt stepped closer. "Can you hear me?" The officer blinked once and gave the smallest nod. "You've been through a difficult operation." His eyes searched the room until they stopped on Evelyn Brooks. Even through the exhaustion, recognition appeared on his face. A faint smile formed. "You came." His voice was barely above a whisper. Evelyn stepped beside the bed. "You asked for me. I hoped they would find you." They did. He closed his eyes for a moment before opening them again. "I knew. If anyone could help." She gently interrupted him. "You don't need to talk right now." The officer managed another weak smile. "You never leave anyone behind." The words settled over the room. Several young military doctors looked at Evelyn with quiet admiration. They had heard stories about her before, but hearing them confirmed by the man she had just helped save made those stories feel real. A few minutes later, the patient's wife was escorted into the recovery room. She had clearly traveled in a hurry. Her eyes were tired. Her hands trembled. The moment she saw her husband awake, tears rolled down her face. She hurried to his bedside and carefully held his hand. "You scared us." He squeezed her fingers as much as he could. "I'm sorry." She looked toward Evelyn. "Were you the nurse?" Evelyn nodded politely. "I was part of the team." The woman stepped forward. "No." Her voice shook. "You gave my daughters their father back." She wrapped Evelyn in a grateful embrace. For a second, Evelyn didn't know what to say. She simply returned the hug. "You'll have plenty of time together now," she said softly. Commander Reed Callahan watched the exchange from the doorway. He had seen countless difficult missions over the years, but moments like this never became ordinary. Later that afternoon, Colonel Holt invited Evelyn into a quiet conference room. Several senior officers were already waiting. One of them placed a small wooden box on the table. "We know you never asked for recognition," he said, "and we're not here to change that." He opened the box. Inside rested a simple challenge coin bearing the insignia of the medical command. No ceremony. No reporters. Just our thanks. Evelyn picked it up carefully. It's beautiful. It represents every life you've touched. She smiled. I've never counted them. Neither have we. But we've never forgotten. After a few moments, Commander Callahan approached her with another envelope. There's one more matter. She looked at him curiously. City Memorial has contacted us. She raised an eyebrow. They're requesting a meeting. I expected that. They've also asked if you're willing to return. She looked out the nearby window before answering. I'll meet with them. 2 days later, Evelyn walked back through the front entrance of City Memorial Hospital. This time, the lobby became quiet the moment people noticed her. Nurses smiled. Orderlies greeted her warmly. Even patients who recognized her whispered her name. Dr. Nolan Mercer was already waiting outside the conference room. For the first time since anyone had known him, he looked uncertain. Evelyn. She stopped. I owe you an apology. She remained silent, giving him the chance to continue. I judged you before I understood who you were. She answered calmly. You judged me before you understood how I worked. He lowered his eyes. You're right. I believed titles made someone valuable. He paused. I was wrong. I ignored your professional judgment. I embarrassed you, and I dismissed someone who cared more about the patient than about being right. The hallway remained completely still. Several staff members quietly watched from a respectful distance. Dr. Mercer continued. I can't change what happened, but I am deeply sorry. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke. An apology matters most when it changes future decisions. It will. I hope every nurse here feels comfortable speaking up when they see something important. They will. No patient should ever suffer because someone was afraid to ask a question. Dr. Mercer nodded. I understand that now. The hospital administrator stepped forward. Evelyn, we'd like to offer you your position back. She listened quietly. We'd also like you to help improve communication between physicians and nursing staff. The offer surprised several people standing nearby. After a thoughtful pause, Evelyn smiled. I'll return. Relief spread across the room. But only if every member of this hospital is treated as part of the same team. The administrator answered immediately. Agreed. Within weeks, changes began throughout City Memorial. Doctors invited nurses to speak during patient reviews. Residents learned that experience could come from any member of the medical team. Younger nurses found the confidence to ask questions without fear of embarrassment. The atmosphere slowly changed. One afternoon, the same resident who had witnessed Evelyn's firing found her checking on a recovering patient. I've been meaning to ask you something. She looked up. What is it? After everything that happened, why did you come back? She smiled at the patient before answering. Because hospitals aren't buildings. They're people. If good people work together, patients receive better care. The resident nodded thoughtfully. I'll remember that. Months later, the military officer returned to the hospital wearing civilian clothes. His recovery was nearly complete. Beside him walked his wife and 2 young daughters. The girls carried a small bouquet of flowers. When they reached the nurse's station, the younger daughter handed them to Evelyn. My daddy says you're his hero. Evelyn knelt to the little girl's height. No. She smiled warmly. Your daddy is very brave. The little girl thought for a second. My teacher says heroes help people. Evelyn looked around the busy hospital. Doctors, nurses, technicians, housekeepers, receptionists, everyone working together. She smiled again. Then this hospital is full of heroes. As she returned to her patients, no cameras followed her. No headlines announced her story. Most people walking through the hospital never knew what she had done or where she had once served. They only knew one thing. Whenever Evelyn Brooks walked into a room, people felt a little safer. And for her, that had always been more than enough.